Jerusalem is probably the most famous city in the world. It was delivered from century-long domination under the Ottoman Turks on the 9th of December 1917 by a British army under General Edmund Allenby. The deliverance was undoubtedly, well, it constituted one of the most amazing events in modern times, since it fulfilled in minute accurateness Bible prophecies given more than 2,000 years before. And that's what we're going to have a look at today. And I'm not going to cover the whole story because there's lots and lots of, heaps of stuff. I've just chosen some of it, and the rest of it, there's a book on the books stand and online called As Birds Fly. Will give you minute detail that I couldn't possibly cover. Now, during the First World War, Australia had troops mainly in two places: on the Western Front, which is northern France and Belgium, and in the Middle East, in Egypt and early in the war. A large contingent of the 1st AIF, the Australian Imperial Force, consisted of battalions of mounted light horsemen. They were mounted infantry. They didn't go into battle with their horses. Their horses were used as transport when they got to the scene of the engagement. They hopped off their horses and they fought on foot. And they were famous. Their horses were fast, reliable, and tough as boots, just like the blokes. Now, the Australians in the Middle East at the beginning of the war were protecting the Suez Canal. It was under threat from the Ottoman Empire. Now, the city of Jerusalem was and had been since 1517, a lot of centuries, in the control of the Ottoman Empire, who were allies of Germany. And Germany wanted to get control of the Suez Canal to disrupt the flow of British ships and arms and so on through the canal. And if that had fallen, it would have made things much more difficult for Britain to supply what was going on around the rest of the world. Now, the Ottoman Empire, the guy that started it was Suleiman the Magnificent, and I think his PR people, were behind the magnificent bit, and he probably believed it. Now, he was the guy that there's the East Gate in the wall of Jerusalem. He had it when he took over. He had it bricked up because the Bible tells us that's where the king would come, meaning Jesus. So he thought he'd stop Jesus coming back by bricking up the wall. It's still bricked up, by the way. So yeah, anyhow, never mind. Now, Australia had been involved in the ill-fated campaign to open up the Dardanelles Straits. And that was about the Gallipoli story that we are so familiar with in Australia. But there were a lot of countries involved in the battle for the Dardanelles. The bit that Australia did was just part of it. There were Indian troops, there were Gurkha troops, there were British troops, French, and so on. And a lot of life and a lot of blood was spilled trying to open up the Dardanelles. And it was from then on that our Australian soldiers and the New Zealanders were known as Anzacs. Now, the Australian light horse guys that had fought at Gallipoli wore a little silver A on their shoulder that designated them as Anzacs. Yes. Now, after Gallipoli, they were put to work driving back the Ottoman Turks from Palestine because the Turks were threatening the Suez Canal again. And in 1917, it had come to a nasty stalemate at the city of Gaza, which is just south of Jerusalem. Beersheba was a heavily fortified town, 43 kilometers from the Turkish bastion or stronghold of Gaza. And it was in a big arc, and it anchored the right-hand end of a defensive line that stretched from Beersheba to the Mediterranean coast. And just to mention, 43 kilometers doesn't seem a long way, but it's a long way if you're riding a horse that needs to drink. And yeah, and it was the other side of Beersheba were the Judean hills and the deserts of Arabia. So there was this blockage. They couldn't get past it. The first two frontal attacks on Gaza in March and April in 1970 failed. The British Army reorganised before trying it again, which was unusual for the Brits. They usually went back and did the same thing all over again. Now, on the screen, you'll see a picture of a trooper. He is a light horseman. That's how they dressed, rifle over their shoulder, and they rode their horses, and they were the whalers. Oh, I love that photo. I think it's fantastic. They were the cream of young Australians. They really were. And in a population of 1 million people, 5 million people, we lost by the end of World War I, well over 50,000 of these magnificent young men. Now, yes, the capture of Beersheba would break, if it could happen, the Gaza Beersheba line and enable the British, Australian and New Zealand forces to outflank the Turks at Gaza. So what we're talking about is coming around behind them. The British 20th Corps launched an attack on Beersheba at dawn on the 31st of October 1917. By late afternoon, the Corps had made little headway towards the town and its vital wells. And at this stage, there was about 2,000 or 3,000 soldiers on horseback with support, horses and equipment that were desperately in need of water, If you get a chance, get the movie The Light Horseman, and it shows it in vivid Technicolor, the lead up to and everything about this time, and it's done very, very well. Even the saddlery and the uniforms were made to the specifications that suited the day. So it's all very, very authentic. By late afternoon, the Corps had made little headway towards the town and the vital wells. Lieutenant General Sir Hartwig Chauvel, commanding the Australian Desert Mounted Corps, ordered the 4th Light Horse Brigade forward in an attempt to secure the position. Brigadier General William Grant, another Australian, responded by ordering the light horse of the 4th and the 12th Regiments to charge at the unbarbed wire. Now, most trenches, fortifications have barbed wire entanglements, but there was a patch that wasn't because they didn't expect an attack from that area. And that's where they attacked. The light horsemen did not carry swords or lances, so they held their bayonets in their hands and used them as swords. The momentum of the surprise attack carried them through the Turkish defences into the town. And in the movie, it's very graphic. 6 kilometres they came, and they were waiting for them to stop and get off the horses and walk, and they didn't. They just kept on going. The light horsemen took less than an hour to overrun the Turkish trenches and enter Beersheba. That picture you see on the screen, that's Harry Chauvel. He was a very, very colourful character, and there's a couple of books around, one of Monash, who was on the Western Front, and Harry Chauvel, and they were really good mates. And there's a story of there's 2 stories about both of them. I recommend you read them. It really is insightful. They were great men, and they were citizen soldiers, both of them. They weren't professional soldiers. Ended up being professional soldiers. Now, at the end of this attack, 38 Turkish and German officers and about 700 other ranks were taken prisoner, and the supply of precious water was secured. The Turks had put explosives in the wells to deny the British the water if they got through, and that just didn't happen. The Australians suffered 67 casualties. 2 officers and 29 other ranks were killed. 8 officers and 28 others were wounded. Now, I had an old friend I was talking about before, old Arthur Rees Morris, better known to me as Maury. He was there. He witnessed it. He wasn't part of. He was 6th Battalion, and he said it was just amazing to watch. Just amazing to watch. And the casualties, we think 67 is a lot of casualties. I think it's 34 or something were killed and wounded. But that was very light compared to most, because they were galloping full tilt into rifle fire and machine gun fire. And I think it was recorded by the prisoners later that they were just so surprised and overwhelmed by what the Australians were doing. They called them those mad Australians. And that's, good feedback from the prisoners of war. The fall of Beersheba opened the way to outflank the Gaza-Beersheba defence line. And on the 6th of November, after severe fighting, Turkish forces began to withdraw from Gaza further into Palestine. They moved back to Jerusalem. The Battle of Jerusalem had begun. General Allenby was very committed to not damaging the city of Jerusalem, because it was a holy place for Jews, Muslims, and Christians. When he was asked to take command of the Egyptian campaign, because it had been faltering under Murray, a leading general took him aside and shared with him an Old Testament prophecy in Isaiah 31, verses 4 and 5. I like to use the New King James. I find that other translations aren't as trustworthy. And this is what it says. It says, "For thus the Lord has spoken to me," this is Isaiah, "as a lion roars and a young lion over his prey, when a multitude of shepherds is summoned against him, he will not be afraid of their voice, nor be disturbed by their noise. So the Lord of hosts will come down to fight for Mount Zion and for its hill, like birds flying about. So will the Lord of hosts defend Jerusalem, defending it. He will also deliver it, passing over it. He will preserve it." And there's a bit more on that prophecy, and I encourage you to get to and read it. It's quite amazing. And it is said that the general who's shared this passage of scripture with him said that he believed that was about to come to pass, and Allenby was going to be part of it. Him and many others, that was about to come to pass. Allenby, being a committed Christian, took it to heart, and the very first thing he did when he arrived in Egypt was to order 5 more squadrons of Bristol fighters, which gave the British dominance in the air. And it was very crucial and very, very critical that happened. It is said that Allenby contacted the king and asked him what was he going to do about Jerusalem. And the reply came back. The king sent him a telegram which said, "Pray about it," which he did. It was decided that the Royal Flying Corps would fly over the city and drop leaflets to explain what was going on and asking the Turks to surrender. On December 8 and 9, 1917, the whole of the 5th verse of Isaiah 31 had been prophesied. But during the night, the Turks evacuated the city, and very early in the morning of the 9th, practically every Turkish soldier was gone. From that day onwards, 2/3 of the verse had become history, because we know that prophecy, when it's fulfilled, turns into history, and it's his story. It's God's story. About 8:30 in the morning on the 9th, the mayor of Jerusalem, with a small party under a flag of truce, was seen by the British soldiers coming to surrender the city. That's the one. That's the picture. And it is believed that they actually found some cooks who were hunting around looking for some eggs for the officers' breakfast, when this group of fine-looking gentlemen appeared with the flag of truce. Yeah. And on the 9th and 11th of December, the formal surrender was accepted by General O'Shea on behalf of the Commander-in-Chief, who himself took the official ceremony surrender 2 days later. It's a great story. Not a shot was fired, no damage was done. It's just a great story. The last clause in Isaiah's prophecy was carried out as definitely and as fully as the previous one. The battle had passed over, so also did the sign as birds flying. The airmen, because of this, became the city's protectors. This was necessary for when eventually the Turks found out that they could not recapture Jerusalem. They trained their guns on the city to lay it in ruins. But the Royal Flying Corps, which prevented them carried out the destruction, they machine gunned them, and they decided that the best thing to do was to leave, and which they did. They began to retreat en masse towards Damascus. One city and one only in the whole of World War I came through the war untouched, without being knocked about by shot or shell. What a deliverance. Those who saw it happen tell of the joyful clapping of hands, shrill cries of delight, women throwing flowers into General O'Shea's car, and they spread palm leaves on the road, just like they did in Jesus' day. Major Vivian Gilbert relates how some of the older people kissed the guns and the gun carriages. It was an amazing thing. There's a picture you see on the screen. That's actually Allenby walking, and behind there is the gate. Is the gate through the city wall, the Jaffa Gate, or the Gate of the Friend. On the 11th of December, General Allenby walked into the city of Jerusalem to the Gate of the Friend, or as it is better known, the Jaffa Gate. He was heard to say that he came to deliver, not to conquer. And that's why he walked in and didn't ride his horse in. Just a few months before, the King of Germany, the Kaiser Wilhelm, had visited Jerusalem, and they actually smashed a hole in the wall so his car could get in, and a big Mercedes Benz, and he was driven in great pomp and ceremony into that area that we see in front of us, in the car. And Allenby didn't want that. He was very conscious of his role as a liberator. On both sides of the road, there was a military guard of honour. The guard on one side was formed by the soldiers from Great Britain, and on the other side by Australian and New Zealand troops. My old friend Maury was part of that honour guard. And he used to tell that story, how he saw Allenby and so on, with great pride. It was a highlight in his life. It was amazing. And he'd tell the story. Tell me the story, I should say. Tell me the story about Allenby. So when I first heard about the liberation of Jerusalem from a scriptural point of view, I knew the background story of Allenby and him coming through the city and what he did. And all of them, all the Australians, just loved Allenby. They thought he was good. His nickname was the Bull, because he was like a bull, and he was like a charging bull. He didn't let anything stop him. He would decide what needs to be done, and he would do it, and nobody was prepared to argue too much with him. Yeah. Where are we up to? But I believe that we need to remember that this amazing deliverance was carried out entirely by the forces of the British nation and Company of Nations. All those troops were Commonwealth troops. and what we call in those days, they were troops of the empire. And we need not to forget that God sent Israel to set the city of Jerusalem free. And it wasn't a Gentile deliverance. God did it, and he sent his people, his servant nation, Israel, to do the job. And it's interesting when you think about it. They tried to, the British generals tried to liberate and knock out the Ottoman Empire through the Dardanelles, and we've got the story in our history of Gallipoli and the cost involved, and that failed because God had other plans. The city of Jerusalem had to be liberated the way it was, and that needed to happen first. And that's just another story altogether. Our man's ideas are good ideas, but God ideas are much, much better idea. Allenby officially accepted the surrender of the city at the foot of David's tower. And I think is there another photo? Yeah, there's another photo. You can come up in a minute. So of him standing in front of a crowd in Jerusalem, a mixed crowd of the citizens of Jerusalem, as he read the proclamations stating that the city of Jerusalem was under martial law, but business would go on as usual, that there were no restrictions, and that everybody's religious beliefs and practice would be honoured. And it's really an amazing declaration. Yeah, they certainly didn't have the same restrictions we're facing right now with COVID. They could get about and just do what they were going to do, and they were going to be respected. And there was no trouble in Jerusalem at all. It was really good. Now, Allenby accepted the surrender of the city at the foot of David's tower, and a comforting proclamation was read in 7 languages, telling the people that they could go quietly and undisturbed about their ordinary business, and all the holy places would be respected. Jerusalem was no longer trodden down by the Gentiles. After the city was freed, the British and Commonwealth troops, just written that down in brackets because it wasn't a Commonwealth, regarded as a Commonwealth, although it was, continued to push the Turks back towards their borders. The Australian troops taking the city of Damascus 5 days before anybody else arrived. Now, my old friend told me a story. They got to Jerusalem, there was nobody there. And the second lot to arrive was Lawrence of Arabia with the Arab troops. And the Australians had to guard the general population because the Arabs hated the Turks, and they'd promised revenge. And the word was out that they were going to kill every Turk, man, woman, and child in the city of Damascus. So they acted as a police force. And Maury was telling him and one of his mates were walking along one day, and this big Arab was beating up on a Turkish, old Turkish man, and they challenged him, and he wouldn't stop. So his mate gave this fella a bit of a bang on the head with the butt of his rifle, and it turned out to be Lawrence of Arabia. And I thought, that's a bit far-fetched when I heard the story. And it was Cole Stringer records in one of his books that, the very same story. So I had to apologise to Maury. He was dead and gone, but I still need to apologise for not believing him. Yes, the Aussies were well known for wanting freedom. So yes. Anyhow, the Aussies were there 5 days in Damascus before anybody else. All this took about a year, and peace was declared on the 11th of the 11th, 1918. So from Jerusalem to the end of the war was a whole year. The liberation of Palestine set things in place for the formation of the Zionist state of Israel to be formed in 1948. And Britain had that part of the world as their protectorate from 1920 to 1948, reinforcing reinforcing the ideas put forward in the Balfour Declaration in 1917 about the information of a homeland for the Jews. And the Balfour Declaration, really interesting document. It just really said it wasn't a law, but it was just an expression by Lord Balfour, who was Minister for Foreign Affairs or something at the time. And it says, His Majesty's government view with pleasure the establishment of a national homeland for the Jews in Palestine. And what we are looking at in the state of Israel today is a result of all this going on. And there's lots of reasons. There's lots of ideas people have. I've got my own, but what we can expect from that part of the world. Now, Jerusalem remains a hotbed of trouble, and it always has been. And I have no doubt that it will continue to be so for quite a while yet. Every US president for the last 40 years has tried to cool things down, but still the rumblings go on. They seem to flare up, die down, flare up, die down, but there's never, ever peace. And that's unusual. I mean, that's amazing for a city that's name means a place of peace, or origin of peace, or foundation of peace. But see, it's not going to be that until the Prince of Peace is involved. So, yes. Okay. But God will have his way. His plans are eternal. We think we know, and I know when Jesus comes, I'll have to have a talk to him. And, you know, because I'm sure he won't do it like he's supposed to. He'll have his own ideas. And so, yes, we need to just go for the ride, I think. All I can say is, Lord Jesus, come quickly. Now, putting this together, there's lots and lots and lots and lots of other details. The motto of the squadron that flew over Jerusalem and kept the place safe, even today, the 14th bomber group, is, I will spread my wings and I will deliver, is their motto. And yes, lots and lots of things that reinforce this story. On that day that Jerusalem was liberated, in Anglican churches across the world, that Sunday, the reading was in Isaiah 31. So yes, absolutely amazing. Now, if you want more information, like I said before, grab the book As Birds Flying by Andrew Adams, and it's available at the bookshop at the conference for just a little bit. Perry said $29.90. Yeah. Now, why did I include this little plane? Well, this is a Bristol fighter flown by the Australian Flying Corps, which later became the RAAF, in the Middle East in 1918. And at the time, they were the height of technology, and they were an amazingly stable and amazing little aircraft. I have seen one in reality, and I think it had a 6-cylinder motor in it, and it made a lot of law. I just think it's just a very amazing aircraft, so I've included. But that's what they flew. They were the planes that flew over Jerusalem. You can see on the back behind the pilot is the gunner, and yeah, he was the one that tried to make mischief and do damage to the enemy. But an amazing aircraft. There are still quite a few of them flying today. So there's over 100-year-old aircraft that's still flying today. So that's amazing.